Good morning. We would like to get started, so if people could grab their seats, that would be great. Imogen, you're an ally. Really? So welcome to this discussion of Black inclusion in STEM, where we'll focus on how to affect change by strengthening education, employment pathways for Black students, graduates, and professionals. My name is Mady Ann Andrade. My pronouns are she, her, or they, and I'm pleased to be the moderator of this panel. I'd like to start by thanking Dina El-Khouly of Visions of Science, who's a co-organizer of this panel. So I'm a professor at the University of Toronto, and for the past 10 years, in addition to being a fundamental researcher in ecology and evolution, I've worked to support change for increased inclusion in the academy. In 2016, I founded a group called the Toronto Initiative for Diversity and Excellence, or TIDE, a multidisciplinary group of faculty volunteers at the University of Toronto who deliver talks and workshops, so far to more than 1,000 colleagues, with a focus on providing practical advice on equity and inclusion. In 2020, I joined with several colleagues from across the country to create the Canadian Black Scientists Network, and I have the honor of serving as inaugural president. The Canadian Black Scientists Network won the Community Champion Award from Black North Initiative last year. We're very proud of that. Thank you. Through these and other leadership experiences, I've met and worked with many dedicated colleagues, many of you here, and spent hours discussing approaches to changing a system that can be deeply resilient in its adherence to existing policy and practice, as we all know. One thing that's been abundantly clear is that it's critical that the first step, as we just heard, is to understand our data, understand where we are so that we know what the problem is. Unfortunately, it's also become really clear that progress beyond that first step of data to action, is much less common than we'd hope. And although there's been some notable successes, like the recent adoption of the DORA principles by the Tri-Council for equitable assessment, I would argue that we now have more than enough information and not enough action. We know that in Canada, there are various barriers that block or delay Black people from entering, being retained, and succeeding in a wide range of career paths, and that is a particular problem in STEM. Like my colleagues, I tire of spending time and energy endlessly repeating and discussing the nature of the problem. Maya Angelou said, the real nature of racism is distraction. We waste our time doing these things to prove that these things exist, when what we should be doing is acting on them. And in fact, we're not going to do that here. We're not going to go over a litany of what the problems are, because what we need is action. Evidence-informed programming, changes to policy and programs, strategic investment to address systemic anti-Black racism and exclusion. This panel centers on that goal. It was co-organized by the Canadian Black Scientists Network and Visions of Science because we share this thirst for action. So we sought to provide an opportunity for our outstanding panelists to share with you the practical side of effective, meaningful programs that can provide sustained benefits to Canada and to Black people in Canada. So we've come to this conference because we know that CSPC draws registrants with the expertise, connections, vision, and resources needed for real action. So together with the panelists I'm about to introduce, I'm inspired by the possibility of seeing real change roll out across Canada and drawing on the shared knowledge of what actually works. So in today's panel, I'm going to ask our speakers to share their knowledge and experiences on effective change in education, the workforce, policy and systems, leadership and accountability. And at 2 points during our hour together, or maybe more than 2 points, I'll ask you to summarize your thoughts and help shape our discussion using the QR code or the Mentimeter link that's on the slide. So if you go to www.menti.com and enter the code 8520556, you'll be able to follow along with the slides throughout the presentation. We'll also have some time at the end of the session to ask questions of the panelists. So with that, I'm pleased to start the conversation by introducing our panelists. First, immediately to my left, Desiree Silvestri is the Educator Engagement Associate at Visions of Science, an organization with a mission to transform communities, society, and the planet through equitable access to STEM. She's also a doctoral student at the Ontario Institute for Studies in Education, or OISE, at the University of Toronto. She earned an MA degree in Educational Leadership and Policy from OISE in 2018, where her research focused on the intersections of Black parental engagement and school leadership. Desiree is a recipient of the 2019-2020 Joseph Armand Bombardier Graduate Scholars Award for the Social Sciences and from the Social Sciences and Research Council of Canada. Currently, her PhD studies at OISE explore the question, how do Black elementary teacher candidates' conception of justice inspire their teaching practices in science? Desiree also works as a research associate at the Centre of Excellence for Black Student Achievement with the Toronto District School Board. Desiree has a wealth of research and practical experience and has numerous publications on the topics of Black parental engagement and Black STEM engagement in the K-12 context in Ontario. Welcome, Desiree. You'll notice I have long introductions. This is an example of application. The literature shows quite clearly that we need to credentialize each other before we start, so that's what I'm doing. Next, Angelo Nwegwe. Close? Good job. Thank you. Angelo is an accomplished senior advisor of business development at MyTax. He plays a pivotal role in assisting organizations to overcome their business challenges, leveraging his extensive expertise in the field. His academic journey began at one of the oldest universities in the world, the University of Bologna in Italy, where he studied biomedical engineering before transitioning to biomedical sciences at the renowned University of Aberdeen in Scotland. He went on to earn a master's degree in biomedical technology from the University of Calgary. Based in Calgary for more than a decade, Angelo has made a significant impact by helping hundreds of innovative companies. He also shares his knowledge as an instructor at Mount Royal University's Bissett School of Business. Committed to mentorship and young adults, Angelo serves on the Medicine Alumni Advisory Council and is a mentor for the Scholar Academy at the University of Calgary, inspiring the next generation of innovators. Welcome, Angelo. Jennifer D. Adams is a learning sciences and STEM education professor at the University of Calgary, Department of Chemistry. She's the PI of the Creativity, Equity, and STEM Lab, where she and her team research equity in STEM teaching and learning environments with an emphasis on identity-affirming, anti-deficit, and justice-oriented approaches. She's in leadership on several national projects, including Securing Black Futures, which seeks to increase the visibility and support the flourishing of Black students in STEM, and the Canadian Black Scientists Network, where she's involved with several projects that support the uplift of Black scientists and STEM students in Canada. Dr. Adams was recognized by the Calgary Black Chambers with an award for Black achievement in STEM. She's an NSF Early Career Award winner and has served on executive board of the National Association of Research and Science Teaching. Her prior appointments include Brooklyn College and the Graduate Center, City University of New York, and the American Museum of Natural History, as well as the New York City Department of Education. Welcome, Jennifer. Toyib Olan Olanian is an accomplished environmental epidemiologist and a dedicated research analyst in the Health Analysis Division at Statistics Canada. I will get through this whole thing, sorry. He also holds an affiliate role at both McGill University and the University of Cape Town, South Africa. Dr. Olanian's expertise spans a broad spectrum of environmental health research with a recent focus on health equity research. Beyond his academic and research endeavors, Dr. Olanian plays a pivotal role as the Statistics Canada liaison to the Canadian Black Scientists Network. In this capacity, he leads and offers strategic guidance and support to senior management at StatsCan and champions a pilot recruitment program initiative aimed at attracting Black STEM talent into opportunities within Statistics Canada. During this discussion, Dr. Olanian will share insights and experiences related to this cutting-edge initiative born from the collaboration between Statistics Canada and our network. Welcome, Olin. Lisa Cole. Lisa Cole, pronouns are she, her, is a passionate, award-winning educator and system leader in STEM education. She's an advocate for diversity and inclusion in STEM with expertise in a variety of roles, including science and physics teaching, department head, school board curriculum lead, and education officer at the Ontario Ministry of Education. Lisa is currently the Director of Programming at the K-I, Kindergarten to Industry Academy at the Lassonde School of Engineering at York University. The K-I Academy is an innovative ecosystem of diverse partners committed to dismantling systemic barriers to opportunity for underrepresented students in STEM by bringing STEM to life, connecting directly with school boards and their classrooms with community organizations to provide unique, hands-on STEM learning opportunities. Recently, the K-I Academy was awarded the Ontario Minister's Award of Excellence in the category of Equality of Opportunity. Welcome, Lisa. So we put together a very powerful panel with a wide range of experiences, and we'd like to start by talking about education. So for many years now, we've had strong evidence in Canada that schools are streaming Black students out of higher education, and because of that, targeted out-of-school opportunities have been a lifeline for Black students in general. In Canada, such programs are usually aimed generally at youth from marginalized communities. Desiree, can you start by telling us about programs at Vision is Science that make it a successful avenue for building STEM competencies among youth from marginalized groups?
Thank you, Madian. Can everybody hear me? Yeah, perfect. So I'll begin by talking about how I entered this conversation. So I'll start by who am I? So I am a Black woman that was raised by another Black woman in the former English colony of St. Lucia. Ironically, I was actually later sent by my mother to England for a better life. So fast forward many years later, I came to Canada where I pursued a teaching degree at OISE and as well as my master's. And it is there in my early years of teaching I experienced this dual marginalization as a Black person and as a woman teaching science. And this is where this led me to look for spaces where I can be, where my expertise and my identity was valued. And this is how I got involved with Visions of Science. So Visions of Science, we work with and in communities existing at the margins of race and income. We take a community-centered approach to fostering STEM identity, belongingness, academic achievement, and career readiness. And we work with predominantly Black youth living in low-income communities in the Greater Toronto Area. So we work with the support of a young representative staff, and our programs are really safe havens for Black students to reinvent their relationship with STEM. We have two major programmatic pathways. One of our pathways is our STEM Catalyst programs, and as the name suggests, these are short-term exploratory programs in collaboration with community partners, and we support Black youth across grades 3 to 8. And we also have our other programmatic pathway, which is our Journey program, and as the name suggests, this program is part of our long-term deep investment in our community. And what we really seek to do, particularly in our Journey program, is to really bolster and support youth along that leaky STEM pipeline in these critical areas where we know we lose a lot of our Black community. Across both of these programs, our youth engage in hands-on STEM activities. They develop and pitch these innovative ideas and solutions, I should say, to solve real-world problems in their communities. They work with and mentor younger children, and also they also get connected to paid opportunities within the STEM sector and beyond. And so we also have at Visions of Science this kind of what I would call a sustainable impact approach, where the youth, as the youth go through particularly the Journey program, as they forge their way through these STEM pathways, they reinvest their successes. They're able to reinvest their successes back into the community. I'll stop here for time.
Thank you so much, Desiree. I hear a lot of links to things that I know that Lisa in the K2I Academy is working with. Can you explain your approach to this programming and to sort of stemming this pushing of students out of STEM programs in grade school, high school?
Yeah, so first, I'd like to say that K2I Academy is actually still very new. We're only a little over 3 years old, and really fortunate to be in a space where I've been given the space to kind of innovate and think deeply about the systemic barriers to opportunity. And working alongside CBSN and Visions of Science, it's been an absolute pleasure. So at K2I Academy, we're using what we are, an inclusive design approach to tackling the inequities in our systems. So we know that the system itself has been failing to create equitable opportunities, especially into STEM career pathways, and that begins really early, starting from kindergarten all the way through to grade 12. So for us, we're really interested in taking a multifaceted approach to addressing the systemic barriers themselves. And we do that by creating an innovative ecosystem where we bring along partners with us. So we're very much about relationship building, knowing that relationship building takes time, and that it is a labor of passion and love, I would say, in bringing the partners together to really grapple with the systemic barriers themselves. So I think an easier way to describe how we do that would be to be very practical here and give you an example. So for example, we have a program called Bringing STEM to Life Work Integrated Learning Program. And that program is intended for high school students who finish grade 10 in Ontario, have opted out of taking physics, a critical pathways prerequisite course that mobilizes opportunity, especially into particular STEM fields. And we work alongside school board leaders to identify students who could most benefit from that experience, including, communities of need, families who may not have the opportunity for their child to maybe go to school or engage in an enrichment program because they might also have to work. And that program, we hire them as lab assistants working on engineering and computer science projects with a mentorship team. And they are paid full-time for 20 days in the summer. And what we found is that the students that engages with us in that program, 100% of them obtain their physics credit. There's a cumulative course median of over 90%. The cohort of students that are engaged with us are telling us through qualitative data that their thinking around STEM opportunities are shifting and changing as they engage with us. For our undergraduate mentors we employ, it's shifting their thinking around who they are as future STEM innovators and creators, and the importance of EDI, equity, diversity, and inclusion work, embedded in their job with us, building that future talent leadership with an equity-focused perspective. Since we started in 3 years' time, I'm going to, share some stats. We've employed over 400 high school students in that program, and over 130 undergraduate STEM students. 100% of the students obtain their credits. And we also have a large geographical reach because it's a hybrid program. We deploy all the equipment to people's homes, and because we're strategizing with community as well as system leaders, we're able to tackle the challenges that bubble up. For example, access to tech, access to Wi-Fi, and we problem solve alongside our partners to build the opportunity for students.
Thank you so much. So we hear about the importance of building community in both cases, of reversing deficit narratives through allowing young people to see themselves as scientists and to see what they can actually do in real life. And then also recognizing the coincidence of socioeconomic status with the lack of opportunity, and making sure there are opportunities for pay for students as part of these programs. All of this is outstanding approaches that are successful here. Jennifer, I'd like to turn to you and say, your understanding of the system in the United States can be very helpful to us here, although people tend to look scornfully and say, we're better than that. I don't think that it's true, because we don't have the history that you have in the United States of systematic programs that target Black youth in particular. And I'd really like to ask you that one thing stands out for me is that here in Canada, it's very rare to have programs that target the problems that are particular to Black youth. Could you tell us a bit about what you see in the States that's similar or different from what you just heard from Lisa and Desiree, and whether you think that kind of thing can work in Canada?
Yeah, so I'll just start by briefly saying that I've, for a long time, I've been in first formal education as a high school teacher in New York City. Then I worked in informal science education, or some people call it out of school time learning. And so I've seen like both, youth learning in both contexts. And yes, in the United States, the out of school time learning and the research and the literature around that probably started to coalesce like as a field in around like 1995 and thereabouts. And since then, it's been really like ramping up in learning, not only in general how people learn in these informal spaces, but then really looking at the different experiences of racialized youth in these spaces. And when we talk about Black youth, like there is there used to be a trend that's like, oh, we have to get, students, all of them interested in science. But now it's moving towards like, how can we make science more interesting and inclusive for them? And so, it's with a lot of the approaches that both Desiree and Lisa mentioned, like really leveraging those, leveraging what's in the community already, including like the knowledge and the resources that are in the community. And that's coming out a lot of like the community cultural wealth work and the funds of knowledge work. And the successes that we think of is like at the early ages, leveraging programs that, developing programs that leverage their curiosity and connect science to their daily experiences, such as like playing with water, learning about the nature and geology that's found in their communities. So really like reconnecting students with land and with place. And as they get older in middle school, that's when students start making decisions about or imagining like who they want to be in the future. And then you start really connecting them to science and real world issues, but using those types of participatory approaches that still allow them to build on their curiosities and interests, and also contribute their ideas to these scientific problems that they see on a daily basis. And then to them, they may not see it as a scientific problem, but then allowing them to see that. And then as you approach high school, that's when the skills become more like work oriented or, for further studies oriented. So that's when the internships become important, the mentorships become important, and, allowing them to be a part of authentic scientific teams, so that they are actually contributing to scientific endeavor and not just, like they're learning, but they're also actively contributing, so that way they can really see and envision themselves as valuable members of a scientific team. Some of the challenges that I see both across borders is that racism is very persistent. And so we need to prepare students and mentors for how to help students to navigate these systems so that they're not out there by themselves having to advocate for themselves. And then also funding to support the sustainability, because sometimes when the funding goes away, the problem goes away. Not the problem. The program goes away. The problem gets bigger. The program, the program goes away. So how do we have like sustainable models so that not only are the programs persisting, but then we're also learning and leveraging how people learn science in these programs, because that's the stuff that often makes it into formal education. And I'll just stop there.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Jennifer. Some of you will have seen that we're looking for your input about the barriers to creating programs that focus on Black youth in Canada as opposed to marginalized youth in general, and whether, in fact, you think that is something that we should be doing. I'm going to switch to this word cloud as we continue the conversation, so you can enter a word or a few phrases on your thoughts. Are there barriers to creating programming for Black children in particular, given that Black children do have distinct problems in some ways or issues when they try to enter these systems? And actually, I'd like to go back to Desiree and Lisa. Do either of you have thoughts on what you've just heard? Are there distinctions that are important when we think about whether we want to have this more sort of targeted approach in Canada? Or in fact, given our population size, is that not something we should be doing?
I will start, if you don't mind, Lisa. One thing I do want to draw from what Jennifer said is this culturally knowledge wealth work. When I think about, whether I guess it's the US or Canada, I think at the heart of both of these countries, the approach is inclusion. And when I think personally about this prevailing idea of inclusion, I think of it as the desire to integrate Black bodies into these pre-existing systems, Black identities into these pre-existing systems. And I think that this does not fundamentally address the flaws, right, in our education system. And so Jennifer brought up this point about this culturally knowledge wealth work, because what I do believe we need, particularly here in Canada, is essentially we need to be asking how are our programs culturally responsive? What is our culturally knowledge wealth work that we're doing? So how are we promoting the identities of marginalized participants in our programs? How are we promoting skill development in STEM? How are we promoting this intellectual development where they're able to, understand the world around them? How are we promoting this criticality within our programs where they're able to name, to understand, and to disrupt these systems of oppression? And also, how are we promoting joy, right, in our programs? So this, I believe, we need to really have a fundamental shift in how we think about how we approach, whether it's Black-focused programs or even having a generalized approach. I really think part of this solution should be how are we thinking about integrating culturally responsiveness into
Thank
these.
you, Jennifer. Before I go to you, Lisa, I'm just going to read, because I know you can't see it, the responses from the audience so far. Thank you. Yes, we welcome that. So the central one is funding, which I think we have to justify all the rest to get to the funding. Cultural understanding, lack of representation, anti-Black rhetoric, intersectional challenges, white saviorism concerns, psychological safety, inadequate staff skill set, things we've heard about even in the previous session. So just to give you a feel for what the audience is contributing. Your thoughts, Lisa?
Yeah. I had a lot of things percolating as Jennifer, you were talking. So I'm going to just, in the short time, I'm going to pull out a couple of things from the word cloud as well. Your comment around sort of addressing racism and ensuring that students and mentors are also kind of thinking about that space that they're entering into. I would say that, we also have a responsibility to start creating the inclusive spaces we need and figuring out how you're going to find allies and people who are going to work with you in doing this work. And it's not okay in the long term to suggest that we have to equip our students, our Black youth, with survivor skills, right? That's not appropriate. And we need to kind of come to a reckoning that our system is not inclusive, and both operationally as well as culturally, right? So going into the funding, comment. Jennifer, you spoke a lot about, and Visions of Science, you work in community, right? And you elevate the work of community. And when we talk about funding, it's not as accessible for community organizations to access funding because of the operational structures that are like a roller coaster ride. And so we need to really grapple with inclusive design, not just programmatically, right, but also operationally, and that these two things are interwoven together that has created the systemic barriers to disrupting this narrative that we are constantly, tackling.
Thank you so much. I think there's a lot there, and the insights we're getting here are really rich as well. We're going to capture all of this, and I'll just preview that at the very last slide, I'll give you an opportunity to leave your email address if you wish to have a follow-up conversation about this when we can really dig into some of these issues. But first, I'd like to move now to talking about careers. Because, of course, pushing people into STEM fields, despite the resistance they feel, and then having nothing upstream is not helpful. So we all know that the number of Black STEM professionals is lower than we expect in Canada. That's some of what people are working towards changing. Particularly among Canadian-born people, there's that problem is particularly strong among Canadian-born people. But there is a good pool of talent across the country. And in fact, although we often hear from employers that they're trying but can't find good recruits who are Black, at the same time, Statistics Canada just released data that says among all racialized groups in Canada, Black workers are the most overqualified for their jobs. That is, they are underemployed and likely to be working in jobs that don't use their skills. Toyib, Olin, sorry, I know you casually as Olin. As the Statistics Canada liaison in the steering committee of the network, you've been central to the development of a program that I referred to in your introduction. Can you please share your experiences and insights about this program for acquiring and supporting Black talent?
Thank you very much. I think it's really important to note that every time someone says, we can't find the right people, we don't have enough Black faces in the room, we don't have this, we don't have that, the question you should ask is, are you looking in the right place? I have, in my organization, in my division, I'm the only one that look like me still. It's been 5 years. And every time they present the numbers, they present it against something we called workforce availability. I'm still struggling with the term today. What does workforce availability mean? Do you mean out of everyone that looks like me, one in everyone, you just happen to meet your quota, you know? So it begins to ask yourself the question, are you looking in the right place? So the program that Madian was talking about, so in my role as the Canadian Black Sciences Network liaison from Statistics Canada, I shared my story with senior management, you know, been foreign trained, and when you're foreign trained, they want to water down your education. When you're foreign trained, they want to water down your international experience. You know, and the problem is even more for those, you know, you talk about Canadian-born Black folks. A recent Stats Canada study did show that you know, Canadian-born Black folks are not just, you know, one. You've got those of African origin, those of Caribbean origin, and those of Canadian parents. I'm going to come back to the statistics, but I just want to share my insight and experience. The recruitment program I'm talking about that identifies opportunity within Statistics Canada and link talent from the Canadian Black Sciences Network was born out of me sharing my own experience. And if you know how government works, if you share an initiative, the first word you're going to hear around the table is, oh, that's a great idea. But what you're not going to hear is, how are we going to do something about it? So getting the buy-in of senior management, I was lucky to have someone in the room when I was sharing this to say, I've heard a lot about the same problem over and over. I want us to do something. So he raised his hand up. He's now the assistant chief statistician. And he raised his hand up to say, you know what, let's try small. Let's start small. We started small in the spring of 2021 during the pandemic with the momentum of George Floyd, may his soul rest in peace. And we started off with attracting 2 talents. And what we do is identify gaps. There are always opportunities. There are always work that needs to be done. So we identify gaps within Stats Canada, and we partner with the Canadian Black Sciences Network to identify talents. We didn't go through, if you've applied for a government job, it takes you a year to even get a feedback sometime to say, oh, come for a written interview. So we skipped all through that process, and we took advantage of a process what we call the casual working process. It's a 90-day work. It's approximately 4 months. And what we did was we identified talents, we had a quick one-on-one chat, and we set up an interview, and the entire process from identifying the opportunities and identifying the talents took around 4 to 6 weeks, identifying the talent and them starting the job. They started a 90-day working contract, and from there the talent was able to see, is this the right place for me? And the hiring manager was also able to see, is this the right talent for me? And we're able to make a case for an extension because the goal of the recruitment pilot project is not just to get people through the door, but it's to retain people. In a nutshell, what I'm trying to say is getting the buy-in of a senior management who's going to say, let's start small. Everyone in the room is going to be like, okay, there's so much problem, but we don't know what to do. Start small. If you can start small and prove your worth and then scale, I think that's really important. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Olin. Start small and scale. That's a wonderful message, actually, for someone who's thinking, well, I don't have the power to do something nationally, right? But I might have something that I can do within my own division. Now, in terms of the power to do something nationally, though, Angelo, as a representative of MyTax, from your perspective, engaging with employers in research development and in the private sector and in the university sector, what do you think are the key aspects of a support for Black careers, or what are the key barriers that you see that you've been able to overcome in your role at MyTax?
Yeah, thank you, Medaya. I'm going to start by talking about a story that is actually recent. Just this week, I received a phone call from a friend of mine. He graduated from the University of Ottawa with a master's in civil engineering. This was 5 years ago, and we were chatting, and he mentioned that he hasn't been able to find work. And he's been working with a landscaping company. Now, he does have civil engineering background, so that might be useful, but I'm sure that is the story of many people. Many people in the room as well maybe might have that similar story. It brought me back to the start of my career, and how hard that transition was, the entry point. And so with MyTax, we are a national organization that supports collaborative research and innovation in Canada. So we work with companies, for-profit organizations, not-for-profit, and governments. And one of the things that we have done to help this complex problem has been to partner with organizations. One particular partnership is the one with the IBET PhD project. IBET stands for Indigenous Black Engineering Technology. And that initiative is, the intent of the initiative is to support inclusive environments in research, and so to increase the presence of Black and Indigenous people in STEM careers. What we did with the added support of MyTax, these fellas are now have been able to take part in paid internship while doing their PhD, working in careers or in fields or with organizations that where they can develop their talent, but they can also show their skill, and more importantly, they are able to start building a professional network that is beyond their enclave. So it's one of the barriers that I see is that often for Black people, they don't know other people outside of their own circle. And so when it comes to looking for a career or making that jump and that transition, it becomes really difficult. And so this type of opportunities, this type of paid internships allow them to build the network, show their skill, and build that confidence so that the transition into the workplace would be much smoother and simpler.
Thank you so much. You'll see that we have another question that some of you I see are starting to answer. What key things do you think would be needed for leadership to actually implement these kinds of programs, even if they start small? You heard a consistent theme, which is jumping over some of those roadblocks to actually getting that first position, making sure that that first opportunity is paid as opposed to a pay-free internship, which many people from our communities can't afford to engage with. How do you get leaders to accept this even on a small scale? And of course, the sad thing that I'm already seeing is funding is central again. Some of what we've been hearing, though, and what we've been talking about is labor market gaps and skills gaps. And maybe part of this is convincing leadership that, in fact, they can fill some of these skills gaps in this way. But let's take a couple minutes and put Olin and Angelo on the spot. If you could pick one or two key things that could make a program like this a success, both for Black trainees and for leaders of organizations that are looking for talent, what would they be?
Oh, thank you very much, Marian. It's difficult to pick one, so I'm going to loop them together. I would say that leaders should look deep into the provisions within their respective organization. You will be surprised that there are provisions within your HR team, within your EDI action plan, that actually makes these type of initiatives we're talking about practical, attainable. You just have to know about it. You just have to know about it to use those provisions, to use it. So I think getting the buy-in of those leaders, if you're in the room, when you take this back, get their buy-in and let them dig deep into those provisions that allow them to actually action these things. Because in my little experience in the government, just 5 years, there are provisions that actually allows you to actually make a case for an underrepresented group, to actually make a case for using innovative recruitment approach. And this idea of innovative recruitment approach is actually one of the call to actions of the Privy Council's office, which is the head of our federal public service, to say, use innovative recruitment approach to attract underrepresented group. So next time you're in the room when you're talking to leaders and, you know, in management, the boss of your boss already made a call to say, use innovative approach to attract underrepresented group, and in particular, Indigenous and Black folks. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'll read a few of these out, Angelo, maybe, and put you even more on the spot to maybe respond to them. So, of course, funding is central, but we also see valuing international training, room to experiment, accountability, which we'll get to later, leadership, time, capacity, resources, education, risk tolerance, and network. Any thoughts about the other aspects of these things that maybe we can think about facilitating for people who would like to try these approaches?
Yeah, but, you know, one that comes to mind here is network. I think the value or the power of a network is often underestimated. Maybe in conjunction to network, I would use the word mentorship, because it did come up earlier about mentorship, but being able to have access to mentors within the organization can provide tremendous value, and that network that we've been talking about. The idea of I know there are many mentorship programs and it's used a lot, but I would maybe the emphasis would be not just mentors for Black with Black, which tends to be the case, and there is room for that. But I think even Black and non-Black provides a different angle and a different kind of access. Because yes, it is valuable to hear the story of Black leaders that have how they have done it. One of my own, one of the values that I found in mentorship was to learn how to speak Canadianese, because even though Canadians speak English, Canadianese is different, as you know, and so that was one thing for me. But also being with non-Black, I think can be, and we don't do a lot of that in an intentional way. I think that could be one of the avenues, and again, opening doors to those networks that these mentors might have as well.
Thank you for that. I think this reminds me of a story with the Canadian Black Scientists Network. We've now had 2 national conferences. The first one, no one knew what we were or what we were looking for. But I remember the difference. We have career fair as part of our conference. We want to get people jobs and into career paths. It's a big part of our goal. Olin was actually central in developing our career fair. And in that first year, when we went to people and said, would you like to sponsor us? And coming with sponsorship comes a career fair booth. Some people said, what do you want us to do with that? And I said, I'm bringing you 300 to 400 highly skilled Black STEM professionals at that conference. And they still didn't get it. Other people said, I've got 10 jobs. I'm going to bring them, and I'm going to bring a list, and can you tell me when people will come to the booth? And so stop thinking of us as a charity. We need to start thinking about mutual benefits, and I think that's a part of what these programs are about. Anyway, we don't have a lot of time, so I think I am going to just spend a couple minutes shifting to thinking about pragmatic things that we need to think about if we do want to implement this in terms of systems and policies. And I think we'd like to start with Jennifer, because you have seen a lot of these programs rolled out at a national level. From your perspective, what kind of structures do we need to actually support pathways for Black youth in terms of broader sort of institutional policy systems approaches?
Well, I mean, I'm gonna go back to funding again. So I think that, maybe thinking about the Tri-Council for one, and then, non-for-profit or foundational organizations that funding, there should be specific streams that support Black students, that really focus on not only creating these pathways for Black students, but then also empowering Black PIs to enact these programs, both from the university side and from the private side, because I think it was it Desiree or Lisa that mentioned before that when we think about these community partnerships, community members are often not brought to the leadership, to the leadership of it. It's often a program that's designed by a university or some other entity and then given, like as a gift to this community program, and they don't have any say in it. So it's important to bring all people to the table in planning. I mean, I really like what the National Science Foundation in the United States is doing with their Advancing Informal Science Learning grant, where they're actually, encouraging grantees to bring community-based partners to, as listing them or as PIs in the grant, and also bringing them to the national conference that happens every 2 years, where all of the grantees come together to share best practices of the programs. And that's another structure that I would recommend, that there is some kind of space for people to come and to share their best practices across programs, and using that as an opportunity for learning about learning, like how do Black students learn in these different areas, in these different programs? What are those promising practices, both across programs and then within programs? Like I know, Imhotep Legacy Academy, they have their tri-mentoring, model. How can that be adapted to other programs? And then the other thing is, when we think about Black people, and I think that Olan mentioned is that we're not a monolith, so you have to think about what are the specific needs of the Black population in your area. So when we think about those promising practices, how can they be adapted to meet the needs of the people that are in your area? So again, funding streams that would support that kind of research to practice development, so that there is a body of work that's coming out of Canada specific to Canadian populations, so that we're not constantly looking to the United States, but rather we can do knowledge building across the borders, because there are a lot of similarities, but then there are also a lot of differences and nuances in both contexts.
Thanks very much. I think we don't have, sorry, please do clap.
No.
I'd want to call out the Black Scholars funding from the Tri-Council, which has rolled out this year, in particular for undergraduates. Some will be coming out for graduate students and postdocs as well. And thank people at the Tri-Council for consulting with the Canadian Black Scientists Network on how best to do that. I would love to see a national table for how to do it, because it's very awkward for white researchers to go up and say, do you identify as Black? Because I've got this really great opportunity. So we need to facilitate some of these things. The money's there for some of it, but not yet in a position for everyone to use it. Lisa, if you have briefly any thoughts on systems?
Yeah, I would. I could just very quickly, because I know we're short for time. I could speak a little bit about policies, because I think sometimes policies drives the decision making of different institutions and organizations. Because I would say funding is an example of a policy, right? Like a way in which we deploy funding. But there are, I just want to touch a little bit on curriculum and pedagogy. Right? For example, assessment and evaluation. We still put a number value on our learners as the standard to which we measure how a student has access and those who do not. And we rely on a single human being to label a student. a grade, and that defines their future trajectories. So what are we valuing, I think, is the question that I have in a system that has been set up to give power to individuals in a system. I think educators all are well-intentioned, right? Like, I'm not questioning that. But I am questioning how our system has failed in terms of enabling more equitable opportunities for all learners.
Thank you, Lisa. We are pretty much out of time, so I'm just going to skip to one last thought, which is to ask briefly about accountability and data. And Desiree and Olin, if you are interested in talking about this, it sort of dovetails with what Lisa just brought up, and then we'll move to maybe one or two questions from the audience. So accountability, data?
Yeah, I could start. I would say in all of what we've talked about today, the thing is, right, a lot of the problems that we've talked about when we think about Black equity in STEM, these problems are not new, right? These issues are not new. And I think a lot of folks come into the space and are genuinely invested, right, in these efforts, and they begin by, looking for ways to solve the problem. How many times have we, and I'm talking about, when I say we, I mean institutions here in Canada, have tried to address the problem of anti-Black racism, and we start by looking to collect data to understand the problem of anti-Black racism. For me, I know for sure that I've been part of one too many of these surveys. And so, when folks, right, try to do this work alone in their own corners and in their own sectors, what we end up with is this endless cycle of perpetually talking about the issue. So what I'm here to say today is that, there are folks, there are organizations like Visions of Science who have been doing this work, and we've been doing this work for over a decade in communities. And now we've actually shifted our focus to really understanding impact, right, and opportunities within the Black community. So if you really want evidence of the actions, the tangible efforts that Visions of Science is doing, I invite all of you to come to Regent Park in downtown Toronto to see the incredible and transformative work that's actually happening through Visions of Science. You'll meet youth who were once part of our STEM programs, now thriving as leaders in their community. You will meet parents and caregivers actively engaging in STEM workshops, right? And we also have this amazing end-of-year STEM Expo, where you'll get to witness youth taking proactive approaches and developing prototypes to solve real-world problems, right, within their communities. So I really think when we're thinking about accountability and, really ending this cycle of platitudes and commitment, I really urge folks to visit these organizations, find out what they need to uplift them, and together look for ways to amplify their efforts. I think this is one way we could move to accountability.
Thank you very much. Olin, I'm going to actually shift you instead to answering a question from the audience, if that's okay. Where are the right places to be looking for Black talent? Where can we start expanding our networks to reach them as employers?
Absolutely. Thank you very much. Know where to find your talent. One of the places to find your talent is the Canadian Black Scientists Network. The Canadian Black Scientists Network are experienced, registered folks in STEM from coast to coast. So you have no geographical, barriers in any place. Organizations like the Black North Initiative as well, you can connect with them. There's a place to find Black STEM talents. The Canadian Black Scientists Network, in my portfolio that I handle, I handle the careers section. So you can send an email to careers@blacksciences.ca, and we'll be more than happy to connect you with Black STEM talents. Thank you.
Thanks, Olin. Although I will caution, our capacity is low. We're a mean, lean team of one full-time employee, and the rest of us are volunteers. So what I would ask is that you look for the opportunities that we've built that let us do it at scale. Our conference, for example, our career fair. We're going to be building it into our website as well, but I agree, you need to look for these organizations. And actually, I think I'll move to Angelo next. And the next question is, do you have more examples of innovative employment recruitment strategies? And I wonder if you're aware of any having sort of this sort of broader perspective.
Innovative. One of the things that I've been seeing at my techs, but even with organizations that we're working with, is really this idea of besides the job description, but when it comes to looking at resumes, taking an approach where the geography or maybe where the degree, often a degree might be from a different part of the world, or really taking the keywords and the experiences of the individual, regardless of where this came from, and trying to just look at the value that this individual will bring out to the table. Often we know that this has been a barrier. We know that if your degree was from a different country, and we talk often about Canadian experience. If it's not from Canada, then it doesn't have. It looks as if it doesn't have the same value, or your work experience, or other experiences that they've had. So really removing those informations before it makes its way to the manager, who is going to have to make that decision, so that the manager can go into an interview and be more unbiased, just truly evaluate what you have done and your capacity, just based on your merit and based on that conversation. That could be one way.
Thank you so much. Please, if you are interested in a follow-up conversation, we're likely to convene a national virtual discussion to follow up on these issues. So please do leave your email address if you'd like to do that. I'll just ask Desiree, do you have one last 20-second long final thought?
I really, today, the panel, we really talked. What emerged a lot from our discussion is, conversations on prioritizing funding. And I really hope to underscore the urgency in addressing the need for transformative changes in systems and the way organizations operate towards, Black inclusion in STEM. And we really want to emphasize in shifting processes in shifting processes, right, with looking at inherent costs, and we must be prepared to engage in critical conversations that are foundational, right, to enabling a comprehensive redesign to enable this deep work within Black communities.
Thank you, and thanks for thinking with us about how to avoid the distraction and function on action. Thanks very much.